Good morning, everybody. I have missed you guys. I have missed all of this. I have missed being able to sit on this stool right here with this podium on this stage. Every single bit of it I have completely missed. And I am so unbelievably thankful to be back here with you guys, worshiping our Father in a way that hopefully will leave every single one of us completely, if not changed, rethinking things about where we are right now in life. The last several weeks have been, for lack of a better word for a lot of people, stressful. You know, we've talked about a lot of different things. We've seen a lot of different things that have happened, and now we sit here in a place like this today, and we're still not completely full. It'll probably be several weeks before we get even back to that point to where people are comfortable to risk the stress that it would cause them to come out because they're unsure of what they're going to experience when they come out. You know, this entire series that we're starting today, it's called Permission to Stop. And even though it's geared towards this idea of rethinking religious stresses, we would really be kind of off the deep end to say that we don't recognize that there are stresses that happen in life. Stress is very real. And in the midst of all of this stuff with this pandemic that's going on, people have experienced stress in a lot of different ways. And none of them are really new. It's just the way that they've kind of been presented. A lot of people have been dealing with financial stress, whether it's been from having to close down their stores, or whether it's been being laid off of work, or whether it's been just not knowing whether or not their job's going to be able to afford to pay them again, or whether or not people that they're providing childcare for are going to be able to pay them, or whether or not they're going to be able to have the money available to get food for their family. All of these things play into it. We find stresses, especially right now because of all this, that deal with our health. We stress out over whether or not we should go out or not because we're afraid that our health is going to be affected. We worry about whether or not our kids are going to be affected. And then we were actually watching a show last night, and this teenage daughter was asking her dad, okay, I'm going to give you two choices, and you have to tell me which one you want to do. And she's like, okay. Would you rather be stuck here in quarantine with mom for 2 more weeks? And he's like, the other one. He didn't even let the other one come out. He went straight to B, option B. Whatever it was for him in that moment in time was going to completely be better than the stress that everything was putting on his marriage. He was ready to step back and breathe and then re-engage. Every single one of us has stresses that we deal with, and especially right now, like we said, finances, health, marriage, and especially the unknown. Stressing over what we don't know is going to happen. Am I going to wake up tomorrow morning and have a job? Am I going to wake up tomorrow morning and is the world going to be over? Am I going to wake up tomorrow and my bank account be empty? Am I going to wake up tomorrow morning and just not even know what's going to happen? They're all very real stresses. Stress is such a real thing. And when we let stress get into us and get into our world and into our life, it causes so many things. It causes health problems. It causes a weakened immune system. When you get stressed out, it's been proven that you are more likely to get sick. You are more likely to have issues with insomnia, anxiety, and digestive issues. You don't want to eat because you're not sure what's going to happen because your stomach is in knots from all the stress that you've got. You can't go to sleep because your brain is constantly running because you don't know what's going to happen. And because you're not sleeping, your immune system gets weak. And I'm not going to stand up here and tell you about all these things without having personal experience. I've been there. About 5.5 years or so ago, Raquel and I loaded up and moved our entire family, including our really just a few months old baby, to go to North Carolina to help with a church plant. We got there, we knew we had a place to live. We didn't know what our income was going to look like. We were under the impression that we were going to be able to get a job pretty quickly to be able to offset finances. All of our moving expenses have been covered. We knew all of that stuff was taken care of. The day we moved, we went and sat in the house. The moving truck that had all of our stuff was still another 24 hours out. And we sat there in the floor of the house that we were staying in and just looked at each other and just broke down, thinking, what have we done? And it's just unbelievable. We got in, everything came in, everything kind of started moving along. Everything was good. There were still stresses there because people were trying to support us financially, and we were able to pay some of our bills, and we were able to get all that stuff taken care of. Some amazing friends of ours offered Raquel a job, helping them at the restaurant they owned. And we were able to go in there and hang out with them and eat and just be a part of their world. And in the middle of all this, we had another amazing friend who called me up and said, "Hey, would you like to learn a little bit about plumbing?" It's like, not really, but I need the money. And so we went in, and I started working with Charlie Ledford in Old Fort, North Carolina. Amazing, amazing man. He and his wife were just godsends for us, both times that we lived in North Carolina. And so towards the end of the time we were there, it was like things were starting to wind down. We could see kind of the writing on the wall that God was saying it's time to leave, but we weren't sure how we were going to get back. And I woke up one morning, and excruciating headache. My stomach was in knots. And I just was honestly the sickest I've been in a very, very long time. I ended up in the bed for 3 days, not able to eat anything, not able to get anything down or keep anything down. And then even when I was finally even able to get something down and keep it down, I still felt like I can't even explain to you how sick I was. And Raquel looked at me and she's like, "I don't think you had a bug." And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean I had to?" She's like, "No, I think it was stress. I think it was the stress of everything getting to you." I was like, no. And then I started thinking through all the things that were happening. And I absolutely 100% believe it was stress. We look at stress and we say, I know stress is there. I see the effect it's having on me, and I need to limit it. If we're honest, we would agree with every single person in here that we would all say, I know I need to limit stress in my everyday life. We know it. We see we need to do it. We know that we need to do it. We know that we need to find a way to pull things off of our plate or find a way to blow off steam. We know that we need to find a way to gain a little bit of extra margin in our world. We just don't know what it looks like. We know we need to get rid of it, and we say we take steps to get rid of it, and some people do. They go get massages, they stop, and they take time to just breathe. My watch is really pushy, because about once an hour, my watch will pop up and say, breathe. I finally had to turn it off. But we talk about, okay, take a deep breath, just take time to pray, take time to just let your mind wander. We know we need to do those things, and we know we're going to take stress away from our everyday life. But then what we do is we add it to our spiritual life. We take stress away from our everyday life where we're walking around and living and doing all these things, but then we add it to our spiritual life. We add more and more and more and more and more busy stuff to our spiritual life. We add it because we've been misled into thinking that we're better Christians and better believers if we add more stress to our spiritual life. We grow up thinking in the church because we look around and we see people who have gone before us. And let's be honest, we've all seen them. They walk around looking like they've sucked on a bunch of lemons all day. In the church, they walk around. I've known several in my life. But they walk around with this look because we've missed the point that the joy of the Lord is our strength. We miss the fact that we're supposed to find joy in the gift that the Father sent us through his Son. And so we go in, and because we look at these people who were giants of the faith in our life, in our churches when we were growing up, we think that we have to do what they do and be like them in everything that they've done. And so we start taking all of those things and adding them to us. And if we're not doing those things, then we feel like we're failing as Christians. We feel like we're failing as Jesus followers. But let me give you a little bit of good news. If you're there, or if you've been there, you are not the first. You are not the only one right now on this planet, watching online, in this room, in your family, even at your job. You are not alone. See, there was a group of people that walked around the earth when Jesus was doing his earthly ministry, and we know them. We've heard their names, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. These were the guys that Jesus went toe-to-toe with. These are the guys that everywhere Jesus went, they were sure to go. Kind of like Mary and her little lamb. But the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they were the ones that questioned Jesus on everything. They were the ones who they taught different things than what Jesus taught. Jesus taught those things, and it pushed their buttons. And the minute that Jesus started questioning them, and they started questioning him, and Jesus started speaking truth, it caused something inside of them to pop up. Because Jesus challenged them on a level that every single one of us, and every single early Jew, every single Christian on the face of this planet has dealt with. See, the Pharisees were even a little bit different from the Sadducees. The Pharisees believed that the oral traditions, the oral teachings, were on the exact same level as the written law of Moses, okay? The Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. The Pharisees believed that the oral teachings that were being done in conjunction with those written words, that they were the exact same. They each held the equal amount of power. They held the same authority. They believed that men had free will. They believed that there was God who was sovereign, but then there was also the free will of man to make choices and decisions. They believed that ultimately there was an afterlife. The Sadducees were a little bit different. The Sadducees believed that there was nothing past the written law. If it didn't come from Moses, it was irrelevant. If it didn't come from the first books, the first 5 scrolls, that Torah, if it didn't come from that, it was irrelevant. That it was those things to be leaned into. They did not believe. They believed in the absolute 100% sovereignty of God, but they did not believe that there was an afterlife. They believed that everyone would atone for their sins right then and there on earth, and that was it. Now, there was even another group in the midst of there that people don't really talk about very much called the Essenes, okay? And I'm not going to get too much into them, but they were even different than the 2 of them, okay? So now here you have in this area, you have 3 different people groups, and even a 4th called the Zealots. Those groups of people, they were the ones that were responsible for making sure that the people who were there, the early Jews, knew what they were supposed to be doing and what they weren't supposed to be doing. So those groups got together and formed an organization called the Sanhedrin. Okay? The Sanhedrin was made up of all of these religious leaders that it was their job to interpret what the law said and pass it on to the rest of the people. Now, let me ask you this. What is something that you're an expert on? Just think about it. You don't have to answer out loud. Just think about it. What is something that you're an expert on? What is something that you feel like, man, I know everything there is to know about this? This is what these guys, all these groups, they all believed the same way. They believed they were experts and interpreted the way that God wanted things done perfectly. They were never wrong. And so they got to this point where they're like, you know what? Well, I see this and I see what you're saying, but in order for us to really reconcile this with the written law, we need to add this law and add this law and add this law. They became mired and sucked in to the very law that they were trying to interpret to help people get closer to Jesus. And it became an obsession for them. And then Jesus came and he called them out. If you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn with me to Luke chapter 11, okay? So we're going to be sitting here. We're going to dive into a couple of spots right here, and then we're going to move past this and jump into something a little bit different, okay? So Jesus here in Luke chapter 11, he's out in the countryside. He's teaching, and he's obviously surrounded by a great, massive group of people because people followed him everywhere he went. But then there's also the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and other religious leaders that are standing there listening to him and watching what's going on. And so Luke chapter 11 is where we're going to pick this up, starting in verse 37, okay? So Luke 11, verse 37. While Jesus was speaking, a Pharisee asked him to dine with him. He said, Jesus, why don't you come eat dinner with me? I'm trying to figure out whose side you're on, if you're a Pharisee, a Sadducee, a Zealot, or an Essene. I want to know who you are, what you believe, so come hang out with me. So Jesus does. It says, so he went in and reclined at the table. But the Pharisee was astonished to see that he did not first wash before dinner. Now, let's hang on right here for a second, okay? Why in the world is this such a big deal? So what, he didn't wash his hands? Well, this was a big deal in Jewish law. You were supposed to wash your hands a certain number of times. You're supposed to wash a certain way. You're supposed to make sure your feet were clean. Jesus comes in and he sits down to eat. And now, with everything that Jesus does, he's trying to make a point, okay? The Pharisee freaks out, okay? And then in the very next verse says, and the Lord said to him, now, you Pharisees, you cleanse the outside of the cup and of the dish, but inside you're full of greed and wickedness. You fools. Did not he who made the outside make the inside also? He says, okay, the guy doesn't even say that he spoke up. It doesn't even say that he looked at Jesus and went, Jesus, why didn't you wash? For all we know, Jesus saw into his heart and he popped up. He says, listen, Pharisees, you guys are so great at cleaning the outside of the cup and of the dish, but forgetting about the inside. He says, you're thinking about the wrong thing here. So he's sitting there, he's talking about it. And then one of the other lawyers, one of the other experts in the law, starting down in verse 45, he pops up and he says something else. He says, one of the lawyers answered him, says, teacher, in saying these things, you insult us too. In saying that to the Pharisees, because we're all part of this organization, we're all part of the same thing, you're insulting us. How dare you? How dare you insult us? And he says, okay, fine. Woe to you lawyers also, because you load people up with burdens that are hard to bear, and you yourselves don't even touch those burdens with even one of your fingers. He says, you really want to get down to it? You're just as bad, because you're more concerned with putting burdens and regulations and laws and rules on top of these people when you don't even keep them. Jesus calls out the heart of what's going on. He calls out the bottom line for these guys. He says, you know what? You guys are, you're more worried about looking good. You have such a desire for people to look at you and think that you are something that you're not. You are more concerned with what people see on the outside than what's happening on the inside. You have such a desire to be seen as holy that you're missing the point. You have such a desire for everything to be just so. You have a want to love the letter of the law while forgoing the heart behind it. You are more concerned with making sure that the rules are followed without making sure that you're actually following the rules for the right reason. Welcome to Church History 101. Over the course of the years, this idea that the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and even the Essenes and the Zealots has had a word attached to it. And it's the word legalism. But what does that actually mean? Some of you've heard the word, but you don't really know what it actually means and what it translates to. If you look it up in the dictionary, the dictionary actually defines legalism as a strict, literal, or excessive conformity to the law or to a religious or moral code. This isn't something that just affects church people. This is something that affects everybody. You can be legalistic about the way you play a board game. You can be legalistic about the way that you approach a card game. You can be legalistic about the way you drive down the street. What does that look like? Well, let's just say, way off the deep end here, you've got someone having an asthma attack in the seat next to you, and you know that they've got to get to the hospital in less than 5 minutes. But it's a 10-mile-an-hour zone, and the hospital is 5 hours away. I can't break the speed limit. It would be bad. In that instance, I think Jesus would look at you and say, it's okay, I forgive you. But this is what we do. So what does legalism look like in the church? What does it look like for people in the church who claim to be Jesus followers to be legalists? What does that look like? Well, there's a professor at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary who actually was quoted. His name is Thomas R. Schreiner, and this is what he wrote. He said, legalism exists when people attempt to secure righteousness in God's sight by good works. Legalists believe they can earn or merit God's approval by performing the requirements of the law. We know that this exists. We know it exists in the church, but we are so afraid to admit it. We refuse to acknowledge the fact that it doesn't just exist in our church, but it may actually even exist in your home. It may even exist in your family. It may even exist in you, for all I know. I don't know your heart. It's between you and God. But we rationalize all of it away. Well, it's good to read your Bible. Yes, it is. But do you hold that Bible up as an idol? Well, we're supposed to go to church. Yes. But are you just going to church so you can check it off? But it's good to pray. Yes, it is good to pray. But do you brag about how much time you spend praying? It's good to tithe. We're commanded to tithe. Absolutely we are. But if you're tithing because you're commanded to and not doing what the New Testament writer says, which says everyone must decide in their own heart what they should give because God loves a cheerful giver. If your heart is not in it, then it doesn't matter. These things begin to weigh us down. When you start feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm not a good Christian because I didn't do this, this, or this, or this, then guess what? You have become a Pharisee. You have become a Sadducee. You have become the very thing that Jesus called out in the scriptures. And this entire series is about giving you permission to stop it. This is the entire 2-word message that Jesus was trying to get across to these guys. Stop it. It's not important. That is not the heart of what I'm trying to tell you. We become so worn out trying to be good Christians, we just refuse to admit it. Because Christians, good Christians, are supposed to look tired and worn down. Jesus says, no. No. In fact, Jesus went so far with the Pharisees and the Sadducees in the book of Matthew in chapter 5, verse 17. He went so far as putting it this way. He says, do not think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I didn't come to do away with them. I came to fulfill them. I came to become the embodiment of every single one of those laws and every single one of those prophecies. That's why I'm here. That's what I came for. And then in Matthew chapter 11, starting in verse 28, he says, come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, all of you who are just so unbelievably bogged down, come to me and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Well, there's a twofold thing happening here. The word yoke, we think of it as something from farming. And it's something that you would actually place across the shoulders of a beast of burden, an ox, a cow, even a horse or a donkey, that you would put on there, and they would use that to pull whatever farming equipment needed to be pulled through. But in the early Jewish culture, there was a different kind of yoke, and the people that were standing around would have understood this because it was what they were raised up in. In the other type of yoke there was the belief system of whatever rabbi, whatever religious teacher or leader you were under, that you were studying under and trying to mirror and disciple under. Jesus says, if you're weary and heavy laden and burdened by this, come to me because my yoke is easy to carry. My way of understanding, my way of thinking about the Father, my way of living this life that I'm calling you to live is so much easier than what these guys are telling you. Because mine is easy and it will not wear you down. See, Jesus came to change the way that we related to God. All of us. He came to change the way that humanity could interact with God. Up to that point, the religious leaders, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Essenes, and the Zealots, they had put so many regulations on top of people to interact in such a way. You know, they started trying to answer these questions of, okay, well, we're supposed to not work on the Sabbath. So how much work can we actually do before we're sinning? How far can we push this before we get to the end of it? So what happened was people were trying to figure out how far was too far before they crossed the line. And Jesus came and said, no. Whoa. I want to refocus your thought processes. Quit focusing on all of these things and then learn how to actually lean into the law in a way that brings you closer to my Father and closer to his heart. I want to show you what the law really means. And so the last thing that he did before he ascended into heaven, he was like, listen, a new commandment I give to you. Love each other as I have loved you. And by doing this, you will fulfill all the laws of the prophets. Jesus said, all of these things over here, if you will just love each other and respect each other and take care of each other, you will fulfill every single bit of it. Love my Father first, but then love each other. And those two things you will figure it out. And your burden will become easy. The life that he lived and the death that he died paved a brand new way for us to experience the Father and to share his heart for the world that we live in. So why is legalism such a bad thing? Why is focusing so much on the laws such a bad thing? Well, it's simple. If Jesus came to die to fulfill the law so that we could learn how to love God and love others, then legalism itself literally kills the death of Christ. Let that sink in for a second. When you focus so heavily on the laws that you forget about the Father, you forget about the God that sent his Son to die for you so that you wouldn't have to fulfill every single law, then you literally undo the death of Christ in your life. And that's a hard thing to hear. There are some people who, if I said that in front of them, they would haul me out of here and label me a heretic. But how can you be a heretic if Jesus himself said it? I came to fulfill all the laws. By placing our lives in his hand, we undo it. Say, oh, wait. Okay, so explain what you mean. Legalism retains the weight of the law. Legalism retains the weight of everything that we feel like we have to do to get close to God. Legalism retains every bit of that. Legalism lays the responsibility on us for getting close to God. Legalism puts every bit of that. Jesus bore the weight of the law. When he was nailed to the cross, every single bit of the law and the penalties and every bit of that was laid on him. Jesus took all the responsibility on his own shoulders for bringing us close to God. And when we allow legalism to slip into our world, we kill the death of Christ. Now, I know it's easy to hear something like this. Ooh, whoa, that's not me, that's not me, that's not me. I didn't think it was me either. But the more soul searching that I do, and the more time I'm willing to look in the mirror and say, God, show me where show me my weak spots, I am amazed at how many things that I do as a Christian, not out of a genuine love for the Father or because I'm trying to get close to him, simply because I'm supposed to. What about you? It's easy for us to think, well, I have to do these things. I have to. No, you don't. What you have to do is love the Father with all of your heart, mind, and soul. And love others as yourself. And love others the way that Christ loves you. That's what you have to do. Everything else flows out from underneath that. Now, I get it. Sometimes people will look and say, well, you don't understand where I've been. You don't understand, God's not been with me through all these things. No. It doesn't matter what mountaintop you've been on. It doesn't matter what valley you've been through. It doesn't matter if you've had to walk through fire or if you've had to walk through a desert. There's Jesus right beside you. Even when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were thrown into a furnace, Jesus was there. Even when Daniel was thrown into a lion's den, he was there. Even when the Israelites were coming out of Egypt and walked through the middle of a desert, he was there. What do you need to stop? What things in your life is God looking at you going, just stop it. Look at me and quit looking over here. Now, you may be watching online, you may be sitting in this room, and you go, well, you know what, I don't know if I'm there yet. I don't really, the whole Jesus thing is still really new to me. I don't even know if I believe it. Come talk to me. Ask your questions. Jesus wasn't afraid of questions. People weren't afraid to ask him questions. The only way you can get the answers that you feel like you need to be able to lay your life into the hands of Jesus is to ask the questions you need answers to. So what are they? In just a second, we're going to do one more song. And as this song is happening, I want you to think about your life, okay? I want you to stop and look inside of who you are and say, God, tell me the truth. Am I actually following Jesus? Or have I let legalism slip in? And over the course of the next few weeks, we're going to take a look at a few different things that maybe, I don't know, opportunities for you to look and do some self-examination to determine for yourself whether or not you want to actually lean into the fact that he's given you permission to stop. Father, thank you for loving us. I thank you that you knew that there's no way that we could have fulfilled every single law that you gave us perfectly. So you had already planned to send your son. I pray that this morning that you would help us to reevaluate and help us see things from your perspective. Father, I don't want to be a Pharisee. I don't want to be a Sadducee or an Essene or even a zealot. I just want to be yours. Father, hold a mirror up in front of us and show us what you see when you see us. The good, the bad, the broken, the scarred, all of it. Father, help us to be more than we are and to be more like you. In Jesus' name, amen.